All right, everybody, welcome into episode 86 of Two Countries, Two Americas All Sports. This is July 17th, 2023. As you can see, we have a three-man panel today. I'm Phil, live as always from Chattanooga, Tennessee, United States. Joining me as always from Americana, South Brazil is Gustavo Tomazeli and our frequent guest, Jason Wyatt. Guys, how are we doing here on this Monday
I'm
night?
I'm great. I'm great now. My first episode as a 30. It's a 30-year-old man. So ready to kick in. A lot of things to talk about. Jason, I feel like he's our honorary participant. I don't even consider as a guest. He's our honorary participant.
I appreciate you guys for having me as always, and I'm looking forward to getting on here and going and talking about some sports. And I like to think I'm a frequent contributor, if nothing else.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's a fair. I like to honorary because like it's better than a frequent. You're always welcome in, and let's get it because there's so much
Appreciate
college
that.
football, right?
Right, and we're still 6 weeks away from the college football really kicking off, but things have been heating up throughout the summer months, heating up more than my tires recently. That been blowing up and going flat and whatnot. But regardless of that, obviously we're all VFLs are all balls. And last week we found out the results of the NCAA investigation. If you don't know what happened, going back in time to 2020, at the end of the Jerry Pruitt era, they get busted handing out money to recruits, money via methods such as McDonald's bags. They committed 60 different level one penalties, according to the NCAA. And, a lot of concern about what that penalty would be from the NCAA. And the good news is the Vols avoided the bowl ban. The bad news is they do have to pay an $8 million fine. And I guess the question that I'll start off with you two is how did the University of Tennessee avoid the worst case scenario here? And that will allow the 2023 Vols to, compete for a bowl game, hopefully another NY6 appearance, maybe more. Um, and, kind of how do we see how do we think the program handled the last 2.5 years?
First of all, I just want to shout out Allison D'Amato. He's with us. And Allison, o Nick e o Jason concordam com você. I just say that, like, I was talking to Allison about a debate about broadcasting, Real Bronco and stuff, and you guys agree with Allison instead of me. But anyway, he said go Tiger. We're going to definitely talk about Real Bronco later. But, like, about Tennessee's as we kind of call like a financial punishment because was not a on the field punishment because like a bowl ban would have been so unfair to this new uh training staff, coaching staff, especially Josh Heupel, because this season we expect to be a 10 or even 11 winning season. But definitely, it's $8 million that we unfortunately have to pay, and it sucks because it's because of a really bad coaching staff. Like, it's really crazy how one bad coaching staff can really screw up your program.
Yeah, I mean, I have more experience with that than anybody here. Both of my alma maters got hammered um, with uh, with NCAA violations, and it's just par for the course. But I think the most important thing to note here is that while Tennessee got hit with so many different violations, the punishment wasn't actually that severe. And I think this is a testament to where the NCAA is headed. They know that they don't have as much authority as they used to because you can basically go out, give them the middle finger and say, I'm not going to do this. You know, I'm not going to cooperate with you. Go to hell. And they'll just fold because Louisville showed that if you cooperate with them, they'll just hammer you harder. And so you've seen the UNCs and the Syracuses and the Baylors of the world kind of give them the middle finger and get away with it. Kansas as well. Kansas is hit with recruiting violations and then immediately goes out and wins, the men's basketball tournament. And so with Tennessee, I was horrified when we decided to go ahead and report this stuff. I'm thinking, no, don't do this. But I think this is the first ruling in the new kind of wave of NCAA in the NIL era of, okay, this is kind of where it's going to go. And a lot of Louisville fans are like, oh, well, why is this punishment so light? We got hammered. What gives? And it's actually not that much lighter. The fact is we only had to vacate 11 wins because we were a crap football team. I mean, that's what there is too. We had to vacate all of the wins just like the Louisville basketball program did. It's just Rick Pitino is a hell of a coach and we won a tournament. Jeremy Pruitt, not a great coach. I think the most important thing to note here, though, is the punishment was very, very, very heavy to the coaching staff. You have Jeremy Pruitt 6-year show cause, which means he's banned from the NCAA until 2030, basically. He has to coach outside of the NCAA through the 2029 season, and then somebody can hire him. And then immediately upon getting hired, he has a year
suspension.
Thank you. Yes, a year suspension. And I think this is kind of the tides turning between the two scenarios, where what was different from Louisville's Rick Pitino didn't really get hit very hard. He was able to go start coaching at Iona as soon as he got the job. And then whereas Jeremy Pruitt gets this 6-year show cause and he can't be coaching in the NCAA for 6 years. And so I think that's important to notice, because I think that's very important to understand, because this is the appropriate punishment. Sure, the program, fine. You put in some minor recruiting sanctions, give them a fine, whatever, fine. But you hammer the coach and the staff. Don't go after the kids that had nothing to do with it. And what I find interesting about this, too, is apparently Jeremy Pruitt told the NCAA not to punish us. And he decided to fall on the sword, as it were. And I respect the hell out of him for it. I do. I don't have a lot of positive things to say about Jeremy Pruitt anymore. That's one of them.
I mean, I was talking to Nick the other day, like how much I wanted to bring him into like a podcast, or be able to have an interview with him somehow, because
why? He has the personality of a stale ham sandwich.
I know, but
then again, that was on the podium. If you get him looking up on a podcast, maybe, because I remember like Derek Dilley going on a podcast one time, and yeah, he had some interesting insights to why he sucked as a head coach.
Yeah,
maybe Pruitt would have.
Like, I still wish I can like have a comeback kind of, because as we always joke, I ask him a tough question and he answered me in the most obnoxious way to be kind. I feel I can, and I regret on the last press conference against Texas A&M, I felt optimistic, and I even asked about like kind of quarterback position, thinking about next year where I should be, and because I really, if I go back in time, I wish I could ask him like for example, Pruitt, Gustavo Tomazeli, WHK. Can you make your case about why you should stay at Tennessee for next year, or something like that?
Dude, if you had to ask that, oh my god, dude, I don't think WHK would have been allowed back in the booth. But
why? Like, did I offend anybody? Did I ask anything that was derogatory?
I mean, it's a legitimate question. If you have concerns over your future, it's a legitimate question. Just because you were a student journalist doesn't make you any less of a journalist, and that's a fair question. You won't see Phil Kaplan getting kicked out for asking something like that.
It's funny. Like, I also think about Trey Wallace, because isn't he was like couldn't cover a game or something because of the article that kind of started all this?
Oh yeah, he was not there the day because he dropped the article on this whole sanctions, and we always sat next to each other at the games, and he was not there that day. So for obvious
Which
reasons.
which for me was really sad to think about it. Like I've been working with sports journalists for a decade, and I'm covering games in Brazil and US, and to really think about it, like isn't it sad that Trey Wallace couldn't cover a Tennessee football game where he, I guess, had credentials to, because he feared for his personal because of a job that he was doing. He was doing a legitimate journalist, like due diligent, asking like an article. Because if you think about it, like I don't know if there is a sports journalist organization or something like if at the time I didn't think this true, but was one of the most ridiculous thing I ever seen.
I mean, I can guess why. I don't know if it necessarily is safety. That's what he was worried about, but I do think on the other hand, maybe he didn't. Because I mean, think about this: if he was sitting in that press box, all of us would have been kind of asking him all these questions about it, and kind of, I think in a way, by not being there, he gets to protect it. It gets to be his story, right? And then everyone else is on the behind the eight ball, and then they got it. Like the Jimmy Hyams and the rest Ruckers of the world really have to um, catch up. And I think it has more to do with that than any fear of safety, because like I don't think Bill Martin's going to come out and have him execute or something, or throw him off the top of the stadium.
No, I know that, but it's like in Brazil, I wouldn't doubt that. But I guess in America, I know, like as we talked about it before, Nick, anything like covering sports in Brazil can be very sometimes up and down. But
Yeah,
like,
and I
but
will say this, just on Jeremy Pruitt, I had to cover a story last week in the small town of Rainsville, Alabama. That's Jeremy Pruitt's hometown. That's where his father coached. That's where he coached. And literally, in my stand up in that story, I literally did my stand up in front of their high school football stadium. It was kind of weird. I did that on Thursday, and then this ruling comes out on Friday. So it felt like a full circle moment of where one of the darkest eras in Tennessee football history. I was kind of at the source of it. And I guess what I'll never understand is if we were cheating and we were playing that, we were paying all these different players, why did we keep on driving out Jared Garantano as quarterback? And why did we, just have no offense whatsoever? And because if you're gonna cheat, at least be good, you know. I mean,
I think
Josh Heupel's up here. Go ahead.
right. I completely agree. And I think the most maddening and frustrating thing is that we managed to waste 3 NFL wide receivers who were all on the same team by trotting out Jarrett Garantano, and who, to his credit, wasn't terrible, but he wasn't good. And he's hated because he was so bad, but he was allowed to be bad. Any other quarterback would have gotten benched. People joke that his dad has to be in the mafia or something because there's no way that he would be getting out there. But I cannot think of a legitimate reason why, somebody like that deserves to be out there every week. But what are you going to do? He dominated practice. But you had Marquez Callaway, Jawan Jennings, and Josh Palmer all on the same team, and you managed to waste that offense. It's infuriating.
But can I make a case? And I get your, but I think if I was Garantano, I would make a case. Look, the coaches that I had, both coaches that when they got fired, never had a legitimate job in football. Like Butch Jones was an intern for Nick Saban. Then he went to Arkansas State, and I guess he's not doing a very good job there. And Jerry Pruitt now he is working, I guess, in the defensive staff of New York Giants still. So if I have to, I'm not saying Jerry Garantano deserves to be protected, and I'm not saying like, oh my God, he got screwed and he should have he deserved a better coaching staff. But maybe if let's see, like if Hendon Hooker was on the period that Jerry Garantano had, like 2017 to 2020, maybe he wouldn't be a good of a quarterback that he was under Josh Heupel.
Well, I don't think there's a question about that. And referring to Arkansas State, Butch Jones's Arkansas State team last year went 3-9 and 1-7 in the Sun Belt, just for reference. So he is not doing well for himself. But to your point, Gus, I don't necessarily disagree that Hendon Hooker wouldn't have been on that same level, but I think you really start to see the difference when you start to think about, okay, JT Shrout came in. Help me out with the other quarterback
for
carousel.
example,
Harrison Bailey.
I was going to talk about that. Harrison Bailey.
Not even Louisville legend Harrison Bailey. It's JT
Keller Christ. Keller Christ.
Yeah, any of these like 2 and 3 star guys who ended up going elsewhere and not doing well, they did fine in that offense. They weren't great, but they were okay. JT Shrout's the one that comes to mind, but there's somebody else too, and I can't for the life of me think of his name.
There was because there was.
Oh God! Okay, what year are we thinking? Because we started. So there was Will McBride, but that was 2017. There's Chris started a bit in 18 because Garantano got benched for somebody. There was Shrout. Who else did we have in 19?
Let's see.
We had 3 QBs in 19 because there's JG, there was Shrout. Let's see, Tennessee,
Keller Chris, Will McBride, and Zach Janchak. None of those guys are who I was thinking of. So maybe it was 2020.
I'm trying to pull up 2020 because there were 4 quarterbacks. I remember there were 4 quarterbacks in that what we call rotation, and no, I remember there's been like a 4th, and the thing is what is crazy about it is that
Brian Maurer, that's who it was.
Brian Maurer.
Oh
yeah.
yes. Oh my
Brian
God!
Maurer and JT Shrout.
Yeah, remember he threw that beautiful touchdown to Marquez Callaway against Georgia, and they got absolutely eviscerated towards the end of that game. It just never was the same.
Yeah, I mean, when you can have JT Shrout and Brian Maurer come in and do just fine, they weren't special, but they weren't highly touted recruits. They came in and looked competent, though. That's on Garantano. I mean, Jeremy Pruitt's offense looks abysmal because he's not an offensive coach, and he didn't hire any good offensive coaches except for T. Martin. And so, those guys came in and looked competent. At some point, you have to give the criticism where it's due, and most of it's on Garantano. Who, again, I'm not going to hate on him because he always gave his all for Tennessee, and he went and took all the criticism in stride, and this and that, and it's not his fault. He kept getting trotted out there. He was allowed to be bad. He was enabled.
Yeah, it's definitely weird now that a couple of years removed and having Hendon Hooker come right after him and be just amazing. And now we have all the potential with Joe Milton. I don't hate it because I'll be honest. During college, I legitimately disliked him. Maybe not personally, but man, just as a football player, I just could not stand watching him play football.
All of that hate's not even warranted. It's just because any other coach in any level of football would not keep trotting him out there when he's so bad. He was enabled to be so bad. But you remember, and you mentioned Hendon Hooker comes right in. I want to take a quick victory lap. You remember when we were on Rock Solid and I went out and said, oh, the best quarterback on this roster is Hendon Hooker, and it's not close, and everybody called me crazy because Harrison Bailey and Joe Milton were on there? Oh, how the table turns.
Yeah. Of course, ironically, though, if Joe Milton goes out and balls this year, he might be the higher draft pick. So, we'll see, right?
I mean, Joe Milton has all the talent and all the physical abilities and the profile to become this year's version of Anthony Richardson, a guy who a lot of people have doubts on, but he has all the physical tools. One coach is going to think they can teach him. And, Shane Steichen took that chance on Anthony Richardson with the Indianapolis Colts. I have no doubt in my mind a team will do the same for Joe Milton if he shows out this year.
Yeah, you just have to kind of wonder, when it comes to Milton, because when I look at a lot of those scouting reports in Tennessee, a lot of the knocks are the Tennessee system is not NFL ready. It doesn't prepare you for the NFL. That all these guys that come to NFL, they're going to have to be taught the pro system, and
that's nonsense.
But I feel like Tennessee is where NFL is going, though. Like someone's going to try the Heupel type offense in the NFL eventually.
I mean, it's just a spread offense. It's just a little bit more spread. I mean, honestly, it's not that different than, a lot of what the NFL does right now anyway. And anybody that goes to the NFL is going to have to adapt. You have a playbook to learn. Every rookie is going to go in having to learn a playbook. It doesn't matter where you come from.
I mean, the whole thing about Heupel's offense makes it too easy for the quarterback. Like, they don't have to go for too many reads. I'm just like, well, isn't that the point of
That's the whole point.
To make it as easy as possible.
I mean, of course, you're not going to have just that type of offense in the NFL, but at the same time, these quarterbacks still have to be able to make the throws. You can teach a quarterback to make the right reads. You can teach a quarterback where you need to go with your eyes, with your vision. All right. You can teach a quarterback that. That's why you see guys like Anthony Richardson going, in the top 5 of the NFL draft.
No. You can finish, Jason. I have a point about the whole punishment and stuff, but sorry, Jason. Go ahead.
No worries. No worries. It's your show. I don't know why you're apologizing to me.
No, but it's okay. But I want to go back to the punishment because one person that I feel should be held accountable, and as much he's a legendary coach, and he was the coach that brought up the national title in 1998, do you guys think that Philip Fulmer should, kind of be held accountable somehow or have any kind of partial blame for this punishment? What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I don't think it's going to work again in college athletics. So I don't think there's really anywhere you can punish him. And I think kind of from a reputational standpoint, I think he kind of has already suffered from it, from the time as AD. But at the same time, unlike Pruitt, unlike Garantano, I don't think we should disassociate from Fulmer because he's a Tennessee guy. He's done more overwhelming good for Tennessee than bad. And, I don't think it was Fulmer's call to do all this illegal cheating. But he clearly should have had people on the inside keeping a closer eye on it. And I just don't think, with him being an older man, he was equipped to lead a program in this modern age. Versus when you look at Danny White, who's younger, who's more more entwined with what you have to do. And that's why when you look at our compliance with like the Spire Club and the Volunteer Club, why Tennessee is at the forefront of NIL, because we have a guy who knows what he's doing. And unfortunately, Philip Fulmer is a football coach, not an athletic director.
Absolutely. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. He's not going to work in college athletics ever again. He's retired from coaching. He was not a good athletic director. The only thing that Phil Fulmer is guilty of is being a bad AD. He didn't do anything malicious. All he did was not have you could call that lack of institutional control, but even then, you fired all of those people. Everybody that was in power is gone now. And so hitting the school with that is not necessary. But to that point, he should have had a better hold on it, but that's because he was a terrible AD. That's not because he was doing anything outright malicious. And so with him not coming back to college athletics, there's no chance he's going to coach again. There's no chance anybody's going to hire him as an AD because he was awful. The worst thing that can happen is he gets honored at halftime of a Tennessee game. you know, at the 30 years reunion for the national championship team or whatever, or 25 years this upcoming year, whatever. That's the worst thing that's going to happen with him. All he's guilty of is being a bad AD. You don't
No,
need punishment for that.
no, I'm not saying about punishment. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying to punish Philip Fulmer. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, if you want to analyze the whole kind of, like, if you want to analyze the why Tennessee got punished, and the things that happened during the tenure. Of course, the big blame, and the big, like, pointing finger should be at Jeremy Pruitt. But I think Philip Fulmer should have some sort of a, hey, as you guys said, he was not a good AD, and perhaps letting this whole scandal happen was kind of like his downfall.
I think if you want to say, okay, he should have had a better hold on his employees, on his subordinates in the athletic department, that is fair. But I think that's as far as it can go. I think, him being oblivious to this is obvious. You want to hide that when you're cheating. When you're doing stuff that's illegal and against the rules and going to get you in trouble, of course you're going to hide it from your superiors. If you want to blame him for being a bad AD, that's cool. He deserves plenty of blame for that. This did happen on his watch. But as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of it for me.
No, yeah, no, I agree. I just kind of go in a deeper analysis into this whole scandal because we lived through it. We lived through it, and I
We
feel that,
reported on it live. All three of us did.
yeah, I remember that press conference was probably we all felt, worried, and disarray, scared, kind of.
Yeah.
And
I didn't think would be top 10 3 years later. I'll just say it bluntly.
I mean, we were #1 in the country for a week, until we played Georgia. That's
no,
That's an unbelievable turnaround.
But I must
I mean,
also point this out, though. How about Dondi Plowman and her leadership during this entire mess? I think, honestly, with some of the previous presidents, like a Beverly Davenport, a Jimmy Cheek, I think this would have turned out much worse. Clearly, Plowman was able to, have the gall to go in there and get rid of Fulmer, to get rid of Pruitt, and, into clean house. And I think her strong leadership should be absolutely commended throughout this process, because she has shown that she can balance promoting the academics of UT while also promoting the best interests of the athletics of UT as well.
and I want to throw out something out there. I still feel that Liberty Bowl, UT, West Virginia, I mean, they gave COVID reason, but nothing is gonna change my mind that UT felt that if they played that bowl game, they would have legitimized this whole scandal, and that's they kind of wanted they found a reason to not play that bowl game. I really feel that they found a reason to not play it, but deep down they knew that it would have been bad to play that bowl game because of this whole scandal. I don't know what you guys think.
I mean, I think that that's a really good point. Because I do think the players actually had COVID. A lot of people around that time, around Christmas time of 2020, had COVID. I mean, it was rampant at that point. So I don't doubt for a second that there was a COVID issue. But even then, I think, by not playing any more games there in late 2020, early 21, yeah, you were able to get out of the limelight a little bit. You were able to not have Tennessee be the story there. And I do think that because here's the thing. I remember when they announced that we were going to the Liberty Bowl, I was just like, why? Why are we playing this game in the season where we went 3-7 And because I don't think I've ever gone to the point where I didn't want to see Tennessee play, but that might have been the closest. And that was coming off the Texas A&M game where they had like 80 plays to our 30. And it was just like in a Clockwork Orange the torture scene that they do to Malcolm McDowell's character. It's just, I just didn't want to watch any more of it. And I think, by not playing that game, you were able to reset. And 21 fortunately brought back more positive vibes around the program.
There was no reason to play the game except to get financially supported for playing in the game. That's it. I don't mind not playing it. We were terrible. We didn't deserve to be there. Nobody wanted to watch us get beat by West Virginia. So Army was a better team that year, and they put up a better game than Tennessee would have. I think it was a field goal game, and Tennessee had gotten beat by multiple touchdowns. So,
I don't think I really watched any bowl games that season. I was so burned down on college football. Like, legitimately, that 2020 team made me hate college football. And of course, the whole season with COVID, it wasn't right. And that's why 2021 was so magical, because I felt like my love for college football returned like the past 2 years. Because in 2020, I just completely lost it.
And Louisville went 4-7 that year. It was same for me, Nick.
No, and I feel and I feel your point, Nick. Of course, we were feeling that because we were so involved because of all the coverage that we did for WTK, the post game show. So we had to endure this whole disappointing and hard season really close to it, talking to Pruitt after the game, seeing fans disappointed. Like, of course, it burned us out of college football. But I just see my point because, and I would understand, and I kind of would, agree, whoever took the decision, like Dundee Plowman or Randy Boyd or whoever, to get Tennessee out of the bowl game, because that took Tennessee away from the spotlight, and they found time to clean house. That was important because if Tennessee had to play that game, probably would have delayed more, maybe the Pruitt being fired. If they won, maybe, I don't know, if I don't know. I feel like I would understand if they didn't want to play that bowl game to clean house faster. And I know I want to, and I feel like now that I kind of was removed from all that emotional connection to the year, that's why I like to analyze it, because when you see things from the future, you can kind of get a better perspective to it.
Yeah, and things are just so different. 2.5 years. So many things have changed. So I think it's been really nice to really in 2023 look back at late 2020, at early 2021, and really kind of think about why Tennessee football was there and how do we avoid being there ever again. Because, I'm not saying Tennessee's going to be Georgia. I'm not saying it's going to be Alabama, win titles every single year. But we can avoid being that. And it's not just about winning on the field and winning off the field. You want to avoid being just a clown show and overall. So I'm just so glad, though, that we can put this whole situation past us and move on. And more importantly, in addition to not the bowl ban, you no longer have other teams that can use this in recruiting, and that is huge. And I think it's only going to allow Josh Heupel and staff to continue the push forward. And Alabama cannot hire Jeremy Pruitt anytime soon. So I think that's also a huge win. And as someone pointed out, this might even be a bigger loss for Bama than it is for us, because I think Bama fans are really wanting Pruitt.
Well, I think the biggest win here, to your point, is that you can't have that negatively used against you in recruiting anymore, and nobody has seen that more than Louisville men's basketball. I keep going back to that, but Louisville was punished, and then there was another cloud hanging over for like 5 years. The NCAA was just obnoxiously in dishing out the final ruling, which eventually came about a year ago. And the punishment really was that this black cloud was hanging over us. And you see how that can just destroy a program. The expeditious nature of this thing from Tennessee is something that I wish was afforded to Louisville, but Louisville's going to be climbing out of this hole for a really long time. Louisville won 4 basketball games last year. 4.
Yeah, and that's just, I mean, Louisville right now, how far they fall in basketball is just miserable. But I think we have to thank Greg Sankey and the SEC. I think, having their presence as well helped. And, obviously, as I think we can probably agree, SEC at this point might be just as powerful, if not more powerful, than the NCAA. So I'm sure that factored into the NCAA's decision to go very expeditiously. And I don't know how involved the ACC was with the Louisville,
No, they weren't. But I like how Greg Sankey took the initiative there to go out, onto the battlefield for one of his institutions. Because I agree. I think the SEC and the Big Ten are more powerful right now than the NCAA, and I think you're seeing that in the super conferences, which again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I believe they're just trying to get these institutions, under their umbrella so that they can have, Big Ten West will be like the old Pac-12, SEC West will be like the Big 12, whatever. But it's just about TV contracts. But with this entire situation, that definitely helped. And then Tennessee's Attorney General has also stepped in. Jonathan Skrmetti, Attorney General of the state of Tennessee, stepped in, penning a letter to the NCAA threatening legal action against them if a bowl ban was levied on the University of Tennessee football team. Which, first of all, that is a baller move. If you have your state attorney general threatening to sue on your behalf, that's awesome. But his reason,
it shows how much we care about the Vols down here.
Oh, absolutely. And his final statement, or not his final statement, I guess, but the most telling statement in his letter to the NCAA, and I quote, "NCAA rules cannot supersede Tennessee law." That's a mic drop moment. And I think that's a big reason
why NCAA is always kind of like acting like they're an arm of the federal government, but they're not. They're their own separate organization.
They're an arm of the athletic departments that make it up.
And to go even further, Jason and Nick, I feel that in about, I'll say, 8 to 10 years, NCAA will become irrelevant for college football. I think what NCAA really wants to hold, and I even saw a story today that flew under the radar, but it's interesting, that I think NCAA wants to take over NIT. Did you guys saw that?
I did not, but that would kind of make sense because NIT is, second tier NCAA tournament, right? Like, it's the best of the best that didn't make the NCAA tournament. And I think that goes into the point I think you're trying to make is NCAA tournament's their moneymaker. That's where the NCAA makes money. It's not college football. The CFP is not affiliated with the NCAA. So the people who make money off of football are different than the NCAA. And I think that's what they really need to figure out a way to consolidate. And I guess the next question is, how do you effectively separate college football from every other collegiate sport? But if you separate it, do you get to a point where college football doesn't fund those other sports? If college football funds basically every sport outside of basketball, but that's at select schools. There's a lot of schools that, their basketball program is profitable, but their football program isn't. But or vice versa. Or you have some like Tennessee where both are profitable.
But I think it might not have to. This might not have this. You might not have to do that. You're just like, hey, we're gonna create an entity. We're gonna, the committee of college football playoff. we will create an entity. It go college football league or something like that. Then you don't have to, let's say, obey to the NCAA ruling. You create your own entity. You don't have to separate college football for your athletics program, but you might create your own entity to be like, hey, we're gonna separate in some term. Like if Notre Dame can be in the, if they're like schools that are independent from conferences and still can play college football fine, postseason and everything. Why can't you, create your own league in one sport?
I think Notre Dame's going to have to join a conference. They're going to have to, especially if what Jason's SEC and Big Ten mega conferences thing come to fruition. There's no way, because all the SEC and Big Ten, they could band together and say, we're not playing Notre Dame. We're not going to let anyone play Notre Dame, and boom, Notre Dame is done. Like they're going to.
And that's what's going to happen too. They are going to assume control and have these mega conferences, which again are just to do with TV contracts. The divisions of the conference are going to go back to geographic conferences like we're used to. Just wait this one out. I promise it's going to be okay. You're not going to have Rutgers going to UCLA and crap in a decade. You're not going to have that.
Yeah.
But what they're going to do is they're going to shut out everybody else, and then the rest of college football is going to become like the FCS. And I think if you're one of these institutions that's not already in one of these conferences, and especially if you're, I think Notre Dame will be fine. They'll get an invite to the Big Ten. But if you're talking like Louisville, if you're talking a school like, North Carolina, I think North Carolina fits pretty well in the Big Ten academically. But if you're a school like, Louisville or even Missouri, Wake Forest is another good one. I think they would make it in the Big Ten also for academics. I'm trying to think of some of these schools that aren't
State
the
is
big
one that I think
Who?
that would be totally Washington State.
Oh, yeah, they'd be in trouble. There are plenty of schools who would be on the outside looking in, and if you're not a part of this, you should be very concerned.
So I guess we have to debate the rest of like the Pac-12 Northwest. Washington State. I
Big
guess
Ten West.
Big Ten
I think
West.
UTU and Oregon easily should go. They should be in the Big Ten right now. Like they should have gone with USC and UCLA. Stanford should be in the Big Ten. Like I'm shocked the Big Ten hasn't gotten Stanford, because like for Big Ten presidents who care about academics, like Stanford's the holy grail.
Cal as well for the same reason.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess the Pac-12, let's say 10 years, gonna defund or cease to exist.
Yeah.
I think the school that's going to be interesting is Utah, because Utah has been very competitive in football.
But Utah can go to like a AAC, or even go try to merge with the Big 12, or whatever is rest of it, with Houston and Cincinnati. Even Utah can join like the Big 12 or whatever is going to remain of it.
Or like Texas Tech and Baylor. I'm curious to see what happens to them, because they've been separated from A&M and Texas. And I don't know if either one of those two Texas schools will allow any other Texas schools to go into the SEC. Or just the Big Ten want to try to go in Texas.
They can say no all they want. The rest of the conference will tell them go to hell. It's like when Texas A&M tried to prevent Texas from coming in and Oklahoma from coming in. The rest of the conference said, we're not listening to you. We don't care what you have to say. And it's the same thing. If Florida State wanted to join the SEC, they would be welcomed with open arms. Or if Clemson tried to join the SEC, same thing, 100%.
Well, if it weren't for the freaking grant of rights in ACC, they would be coming right now, because the ACC has their
the grant of rights in the ACC that expires in 2036 is the only reason that the ACC is still around today. That is a guarantee. I spent Lord knows how many hours discussing the stupid grant of rights on ESPN Louisville. It's literally the only reason the conference still exists.
What is it for people like myself? What is the grant of rights?
Okay, so the grant of rights is the television contract. And so basically, in succinct terms, Gus, if you want to leave the ACC, you have to give all of your television revenue from anywhere else you go to the ACC until 2036. Period. So if Clemson went to the SEC or Florida State went to the SEC, every penny that they made from the SEC's TV deals goes straight to the ACC, and they see none of it because they are in this legally binding contract in this grant of rights. And so the ACC is on very solid ground for the next 13 years because of that threat. And eventually what's going to happen is in my view is if you have, you're getting to like 2030 and this is starting to dwindle down, what these schools are going to do, especially Clemson and Florida State, those are the two big ones. They're just going to buy themselves out of this deal. They'll offer a huge lump sum, buy themselves out of the contract, and they'll bolt. But with 13 years left on the deal, the ACC can say, "Nah, we'll make more money. Do it. You want to go to the SEC? Do it. And we'll cash the check."
Yeah. I guess that is what kind of holds ACC together, because if you think about it, the more the SEC expands, the more the ACC becomes kind of irrelevant, because everybody knows Florida State will make sense in SEC playing against Florida. Clemson play against South Carolina. Georgia Tech play against Georgia. Louisville play against Kentucky. Like all the rivalries that ACC have is against SEC schools.
Yeah.
And also, I would want to see some of the North Carolina schools show up too, because those are more natural rivals from South Carolina as well.
Yeah, I think all the North Carolina schools, UNC, Duke, and UNC and Duke especially.
Wake Forest.
Well, those guys, UNC and Duke and Wake Forest, they belong academically in the Big Ten. And then, NC State, can give or take. But if you talk about which one makes more sense for their sports that they actually care about for those schools, okay, for Duke and North Carolina, that's basketball. That's the Big Ten. The Big Ten makes more sense for those guys academically and in the sport that they care about in basketball. And I think geographically it's really going to end up like that. And I think the only real head scratcher for this, and this has been my prediction for a while now, I think Miami goes to the Big Ten, the U. I think they go to the Big Ten, and that's not only academically speaking, but Florida and Florida State will not allow them to go into the SEC. Florida and Florida State together have enough pull to deny a school like Miami, a regional school, from impeding their territory. But think about this. Think about how productive it would be for the television contracts, for markets, for the ACC and the SEC if Vanderbilt went to the ACC and Wake Forest went to the SEC. In those conferences, you gain an extra state. The ACC gains Tennessee, and the SEC gains North Carolina. How productive would that be? And you're just switching a terrible program for another terrible program. All they're relevant in is in baseball for both schools.
I mean, they're basically carbon copies. I mean, Wake Forest has been a bit better at basketball over the years when they had like Tim Duncan and Chris Paul, but like outside of when they had
did they beat 2012
superstars.
Kentucky? No. Vanderbilt beat 2012 Kentucky.
That's true. I mean, quite literally, they are basically carbon copies of each other.
Yeah.
Although,
and I feel like when this mega conferences are formed, and I think I talked to Nick about this. I don't remember when, but I remember, like, do you think this could be what happened in the beginning of the NFL, where there was the AFL and the NFL, and then then become the NFC and the AFC? Then it's gonna be Big 12, Big 10, and SEC play each other. Then you have the champion, the conference championship, and whoever win those conferences play for the national title.
Honestly, that would be so sick. Yeah.
I think it's going to look a lot like that, to be honest. I don't think you're going to have a whole lot of interleague play because you're going to have enough schools in your own conference, in the different divisions of the conference. But I think it's definitely going that way. You'll have your own playoffs on each side, and you'll end up having, your Ohio State or whatever Big Ten champion playing against your Georgia or whatever SEC champion. That's a good playoff. You pick a neutral site. Everybody gets everybody from this point upwards in the standings gets to go. Cool. I have no problem with that.
I mean, could we create a college Super Bowl effectively? That's more of an event than the current national title. With that, with the idea of a permanent SEC versus a permanent Big Ten.
I don't see why not.
That's probably what Tony Petitti and Greg Schenke dream. Imagine those two commissioners would have been like, that's their probably ultimate goal with all that, getting programs into their conference. That's their ultimate goal. Like, if you ask them, like, not with interview and stuff, but, behind the scenes, like, that's their ultimate goal.
I mean, it's certainly going to be fascinating. I know a lot of people are doomer about it, and with how college football is evolving. But I think, at the end of the day, when we get to September, each September, college football for the most part is going to look relatively the same. You just might have slightly different opponents than you're used to. And that's what ultimately, matters. Like, at this point, like, it's normal for me, or normal for us to play Missouri every year. That wasn't normal 10 years ago, but like, I just accept that we play Mizzou. Yeah, I just accept we play Mizzou. Like, I accept that Louisville's in the ACC. Like, you used to, like, they play Cincinnati and Pitt. Well, they still play Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and like West Virginia. Yeah, and like, obviously those were banger games back in the 2000s, but now they play Miami. So
Clemson.
In Clemson.
Florida State.
You get used to it.
Oh yeah, definitely. You always get, like, for example, the SEC today already released a TV promo with Texas and Oklahoma in it, and they aren't in the conference. So they already try to make them fans used to. Like, did you guys saw that promo?
I did not see the promo, but like, those two I think will fit in pretty cool. Like, Texas, I've always thought of them as a potential future SEC team. Like, back when I had NCAA 14, you could do the conference realignments. I put Texas in the SEC, so I kind of always had an inkling that this would happen eventually. OU was a little bit more surprising, but I think thinking about it in terms of
taking Texas and Oklahoma as a package is just a given.
Oh, absolutely. It's like USC and UCLA to the Big Ten. But it kind of, I guess, brings up another point that I wanted to bring up here, because we're going to start doing a series of previews, looking at the different conferences about this season, the 2023 season. And as we kind of mentioned, for this season in the SEC, this is the last year without Texas and Oklahoma, the last year of the 14-team season, and the last year of SEC on CBS. Because after this year, CBS goes to the Big Ten, and the SEC next year begins full on with ESPN, every game on the ESPN family of networks. And it's going to be kind of weird thinking that this is the last year of the SEC as we knew it.
Yeah, like, the CBS deal is gonna end, so one kind of huge cornerstone that kind of was this old SEC is gonna fall, and new teams are gonna go. And I'm excited to see this new SEC, this new, like, because I know it's scary to change, but in sports you have to. It's adapt or die, and college football is just showing why they are the prince alongside with NFL there. That's the king of, that's why football dominates America in terms of ratings, in terms of popularity, in terms of money making. That's why, there's not even close. Like, football, was probably one of the last sports that kind of went pros, with baseball was already having pro teams by the late 19th century, early 20th century. NBA was also by the 1940s and 50s already kind of had some kind of, professional league. Like, football came last, but now football is dominating.
Yeah, I mean, football is the culture. Like, football is what Americans culturally. It's the only sport that really Americans culturally circle around. Like, you still get basketball, baseball, they have their place, but football is what communities will come together to watch in the fall. It's what people will sit down and watch. Like, people don't sit around and watch Red Zone for the NBA. They don't watch Red Zone for the MLB. You know, fantasy football is the biggest form of fantasy sport. Like, football is football, and it is uniquely American
And
because
and,
of
and
that.
No, and a lot of people came to me and talk American sports, and they asked me, "Oh, what's the number one sport in America? It's football, basketball, baseball." People in Brazil think, "Oh, it's basketball, NBA. There's so much, talent and so many stars." And I always kind of crush them. Like, it's football is not even close. Like, if
Right.
that's why NBA and MLB are heavily going international. Like,
They have
NFL,
to.
they have to.
Yeah.
Like, NFL can take the luxury of going baby steps and going Mexico and England and now Germany. But like, you see what the NBA and MLB is doing. Teams are gonna have opening season in South Korea. I think South Korea or like Asia. NBA is probably gonna go even harder to get even their talent somewhere else. Like, NBA and MLB are going heavily with talent, and even live games internationally. NFL, like football, doesn't have to do that.
I mean, the
And I think
Spurs are
it's
going to play
also
in France at some
Oh,
point.
go ahead, Jason. Jason and Nick.
it's also really important to note that basketball and baseball are also just international games to begin with, whereas you have these big professional leagues elsewhere. As in football, you know, the second highest league is the NCAA Division One. The second highest standard football league is probably the SEC. You talk about, oh well, the Canadian League or the XFL or the whatever. I bet Georgia could probably compete with those teams. Georgia could never compete with the NFL though. And that's the point I'm trying to drive home here is the NFL is the only league of its kind. Whereas Major League Baseball has, competitor leagues, which they're not exactly competitors because it's the number one league, but you have the Japanese league, you have the South Korean league. You've got all these different places where these players can play and come from. And then in basketball, you got the Euro League and you've got, the Chinese League. There's pretty high level leagues. Now they're not the NBA, but they're high level leagues. And it's you just don't have anything like that for football.
No,
Right.
no,
And,
yeah,
and like compare it in America, Super Bowl gets 114 million viewers. The NBA Finals is lucky if they get 10.
no, no, yeah, yeah, yeah. I know we're getting kind of like a little bit like off topic in terms of college football, going to like a kind of sports cultural kind of talk, but like
I think it's been a good conversation.
oh no, yeah, yeah, exactly. And from the time that I lived in the US and I tried to really drive myself into the culture and understand it, what I talk to people is like people love basketball and baseball in America. Don't get me wrong; they really cheer for their local team. They really love, but football is beyond that. Football is a matter of what soccer here in Brazil. It's a cultural thing that you want to like trash talk your rival. You want to like Saturday, like Sunday here is religious for soccer. Saturday in the fall is religious for college football. Like the baseball and basketball, they don't have that. What Saturday is for the college football and Sunday is for the NFL. So that's why it's not about don't have other leagues. It's about what you have the culture for sports for your country.
Yeah, and you've got 3 magical weekends in the month of March and sometimes the first weekend in April for college basketball. But you think about how magical those weekends are. Those are an average week 3 in college football season. And that's the levels of difference.
It's you think about like the course of human history and how people have come together, how they celebrate festivals, how they celebrate religion. And the way that we celebrate college football in the South isn't different. Like, I mean, yes, we're not killing people like the Romans did in the Colosseum, but if you look at the hubbub around how the Romans would approach and revere the events of the Colosseum, I mean, how different is that from Neyland Stadium? I mean, it really isn't. You've got 100,000 people who live all across this country. They come together for 7 Saturdays in the fall in Neyland Stadium on the banks of the Tennessee River, and you just share a magical moment together, a magical couple of hours that you can't really get elsewhere. So
No, and for me, what is been crazy about football is in baseball and basketball, you don't see tailgating as like harder in football. Like I talk to people here, like they found this idea crazy. There's people who go to Neyland Stadium, but they don't actually go into the stadium. They stay around for tailgating, but they want to experience the environment of what that game provides.
yeah, it's just hard. It's really hard to understand it if you're not a part of it. Like the whole idea of bands, the whole idea of all the pageantry, all the traditions, and even with all the changes that we have to college football, all of that's not going away because that's just too important, and there's too many alums that care about all the other stuff too, for that to go away. So I'm confident in the future of college football to still provide what its magical qualities are.
Yeah,
So I do kind of want to steer us back to the SEC topic because I do want to do a bit of an SEC preview. Obviously, coming into this season, obviously the favorite, the team to be is Georgia. They are back-to-back national
Well, don't
champions.
tell them that. Everybody doubts them.
Yeah, well, Kirby Smart, I guess he'll always try to convince you that, oh, Georgia, everyone that can beat us. Kentucky is the toughest team we play every year. Kent State gave us a really, really good time. But I mean, as much of a Georgia hater as I am, I would have to be honest here. They are, they're defending national title, the back-to-back titles. I mean, their team last year. I mean, it was weird about Georgia last year because they had times when they went to Missouri, when they played Kent State, they didn't look very good. But in the biggest games, when they played Oregon, when they played Tennessee, when they played TCU, they were on it. And the only times they felt like they were really in danger outside like that Missouri game was Ohio State. And Ohio State, if they had a kicker, should have beaten them. But, they survived and they got to absolutely pummel TCU. But they have to start a new quarterback this year. Stetson Bennett, somehow a 2-time national title winner. That's a hard fact for me to accept. As much as I have trashed that man as quarterback, as much as I said he has sucked at quarterback, he's got the rings. But in comes Carson Beck, who to me is a more conventional quarterback. Physically with the tools that he has, and of course he gets to have, Brock Bowers among other targets for Georgia, and when you look at their schedule, it's a joke. None of their non-conference games are hard. And really when they're coming to their conference games, they really have 2 difficult road games. At Auburn, at Tennessee. Of course, Auburn's kind of rebuilding. We don't know what they're going to be. But there's a good chance, in my opinion, they're not tested until they come to Neyland in late November. And honestly, I kind of hope they aren't. I want them to cruise for the first 10 weeks, 10-0, no challenges, because I want them to get in a position where they come to Neyland and they have to face adversity. They haven't done it all year. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to face adversity somewhere. And honestly, the best teams they play before Tennessee are 2 home games, South Carolina and Ole Miss. I think those are the 2 best teams they play. Now, I'm not sure if I'm confident in either one of those teams taking them on in Sanford Stadium. But I think those are the 2 toughest games they play.
Jason?
So,
I think that having a guy like Ladd McConkey, as well as obviously Brock Bowers to throw to, is going to give Beck a big time, security blanket. Their run game is going to be good as it always is. But your two best players on the offense are going to be Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers. And as long as you have two big time targets to throw to, you're going to be fine. And if their defense shows up, they're going to be in the national title hunt once again. But don't tell them that, because they're doubted. Whatever, they're the underdog.
Kirby Smart is just using the Nick Saban handbook about trying to deflect from favoritism.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest questions to me about Georgia are more off the field, because it's been a rough offseason. Of course, you've had tragedy at the beginning with Devin Willock and the whole street racing, and just, but what's crazy is the street racing didn't stop. Like, there's been other incidents of street racing throughout the offseason. So many Georgia players have been arrested, ticketed for various vehicle violations. Of course, there was just the whole scandal with the recruit, but that turned out not to be as reported by the AJC, and now they're mad at the AJC, and it's been a whole lot of off the field stuff, and I don't know if any of that's going to really translate to a decrease on the field. But I mean, the only place you can go if you're Georgia is down, right? Because you were 15-0. And you have to wonder, as you lose the players that went 15-0 and won those titles, can the next batch of players continue to match that intensity? So to me, that's kind of, I think, where Georgia finds itself heading into the season. But anyway, just kind of
I agree with you. I think Georgia's schedule definitely is a smooth sailing, and probably the real task is going to be Tennessee. That game is probably going to be probably the hardest game, and if Tennessee wins this game, then probably will delegitimize the rest of Georgia's schedule. I hope.
I mean, the question is, if Georgia's 11-1 and their only loss is at Tennessee, do they make the playoff? Because I mean, when you look at the rest of their schedule, and let's say Tennessee is 11-1 and we make the SEC championship, they don't go to the SEC championship. I don't know.
You can't even ask the question with a straight face, Nick.
Okay, maybe I'm just wish casting here, because I would hope in a fair, just world they would be punished for dropping the Oklahoma game.
But college football is not a fair and just world. You know this. Tennessee would have gotten in or Tennessee would have been ranked higher than Alabama last year if it was.
That's fair. That's certainly fair. And Georgia just has to earn the.
But that's a legitimate question. Like, if Tennessee is 11-1 and their only loss is to Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and they go and win the SEC championship.
Here's the thing.
There's a scenario where multiple teams get in.
Yeah, I think that's very possible. Now, I will say this, trenching over to the West real quick, on Alabama, I have serious questions about Alabama. I don't know who their quarterback's going to be. Is it going to be Jalen Milroe? Is it going to be Tyler Buchner, the Notre Dame transfer? I don't really believe in their OC and Tyler Reese. Apparently, they are talking about going more old school. Really pounding the rock more like they used to 5, 6, 7 years ago before Lane Kiffin. The receiving corps is probably the weakest it's been in years. There's not a true bona fide superstar there.
Don't forget about Tennessee legend Ty Simpson in that quarterback room as well.
Yeah, Ty Simpson also there. Of course, Milrose and Buckner have the experience in starting games versus Simpson, but hey, any one of them could start. Defensively, they have to replace Will Anderson. I think Bama will be defensively led this year versus their offense. But when you look at what they did last year, I think Bryce Young was so underrated last year. I thought, honestly, he had a better season last year than the year before, but because of the fact that he lost in 2 games, it doesn't get acknowledged, because if it wasn't for him, they get blown out in Knoxville. If it wasn't for him, they get blown out in Baton Rouge. And there were several other games where, like at Texas, they would have lost that game without Bryce Young. And it just Alabama was just very uncharacteristic, and I think they have truly lost a bit of their edge.
Oh, they have.
Out
They're
of the
not the
program.
only team that's 3 deep at every position anymore, and it shows. Georgia has shown they can do it as well. And when you have 3 or 4 different quarterbacks who all have a legitimate case to be a starter, do you really have any? I mean, if you don't have a guy that's head and shoulders above the other, do you really have a quarterback? And I truly, I said, the tongue-in-cheek comment about I truly think he has as good a shot as any to win that job. And I think he will. He is my prediction for who the Alabama quarterback will be this year. He has a decent understanding of the offense, and he's the most. I think he's the best passer of the offense.
I'll say this too. It's going to be fascinating in week 2 when they host Texas. If they get into a situation where their offense struggles against the Longhorns, whoever starts, do they pull them to go to a different one? Do we get in a situation where they go into a quarterback carousel? We've never really seen that from Alabama.
Not with Nick Saban. Nick Saban is going to make his choice, and he's going to stick to it. He didn't get to be to the level of dominance that he got to without being able to make a decision and stick to his guns. The only time I've ever really seen him change his mind was benching Jalen Hurts, and he rode the hot hand in the national championship, and the rest is history. Nick Saban is as cutthroat as it comes, and he is decisive. Which, of course, that says, okay, if it's not working, he will change, but he's gonna make that decision, and he's gonna stick with it, I think.
I'm sure. I mean, you're definitely not
It's
wrong
not
about
going to
that.
be a carousel.
Yeah. And again, this may be me just wish cashing and hoping this is the year where we truly start seeing the downfall of Alabama. And, and granted, I have confidence. I have confidence considering that we just beat them last year. And I'm dreaming of, can we go into Tuscaloosa and take them out for a second year in a row? And I think we have a shot of it. I know we're not, obviously we're not going to be favored, but I think it's going to be a tight game down there. I really think that third Saturday in October is back. It's going to be an electric atmosphere in Tuscaloosa. So we'll have to find a way to navigate that tough atmosphere because we did have moments last year where I think opposing crowds got to us, especially at Georgia and at South Carolina. Like I was there in person for Carolina, and that was a loud stadium, and I think that maybe got to us, especially defensively.
And I think it's really important to remember also, the Vols played a really tough game in 2021 in Tuscaloosa. The only reason that game got away so much at the end is because Tennessee just didn't have the depth after everybody transferred. Tennessee didn't have the horses in the stable to keep up with Alabama. But that was a tough game, and it was pretty tight for the first half or maybe even 3 quarters.
And right now, Tennessee easily has the better offense. They have the more trusted quarterback. They have a better stable of receivers. I think running backs are comparable. I think, obviously the difference is, offensively, there's a lot of questions for the Vols. And, but I will say this, if our offense can be similar to last year and put up the same type of numbers, you don't need an elite defense. You just need a good enough defense for Tennessee. And I almost feel like this is going to become a recurring theme when we talk about Josh Heupel. It's going to be like Lincoln Riley, where can the defense be good enough? And I feel like we're going to get into like a Groundhog Day constant cycle. But I would rather be in this situation than where we were a few years ago. Because at least it's going to be fun and it's going to be exciting to watch. Speaking of kind of the rest of the SEC, obviously I think the team, that made the most waves last year was LSU going to the national title game. Or not SEC title game. No, it's not 2019. They went to the SEC last year and they beat Alabama. Of course, they got crushed by Georgia, but still, considering what happened to them in early October, getting destroyed by Tennessee 40-13, it was pretty impressive to see them have a turnaround. And a lot of people seem to think they're a playoff contender this year. But I'm not completely sold still. Like, I need to see more consistency out of the quarterback position before I anoint LSU as a true playoff contender.
I can get behind it. I think that they're trending upwards, but a lot of teams are trending upwards. You got to trend upwards and stay up there at a sustained level to be able to compete for a national championship. And I think it's going to be a very telling year for LSU, for South Carolina, for USC. USC made strides, but they also lost to Tulane and Utah. Can they take the next step? There's a lot of questions, but I think the usual characters, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, if they can get it together, which, they have the best coach of all time, I think that they probably will get it together. The usual suspects are going to be the ones that are going to be at that level, and then you'll have somebody else rise to the occasion, but I'm very excited to see who it's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. One topic I did have here I wanted to bring up in the course of the discussion of the SEC, Texas A&M, and I definitely want your take on this, Jason, as someone who has a lot of history with Bobby Petrino.
Oh, geez.
So Bobby Petrino now is the OC at Texas A&M. Jimbo Fisher came out today and was asked if Bobby Petrino is going to be the guy to call plays.
I'll tell you what, if he's
awesome.
not, he'll walk out.
Yeah. So
if he's not calling plays, he will walk out, just like he did at the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah. It's really interesting that so this was the quote I wanted to bring up. I'm not going to get into that, which is, the who's going to call the plays. Bobby was hired for a reason. Tremendous guy, tremendous football mind. Hopefully he'll call the game and have suggestions. What tremendous in the world do you mean by
you can't possibly be serious.
But what do you mean by hopefully call the game and have suggestions? What does that mean?
It means they're going to fist fight on the sidelines, and I'm here for it. They're two of the three most disliked figures in college football coaching.
Yeah, it's just when it comes to A&M, when you look at the talent, they should be competing with the top echelon SEC, but I don't know. I think there's too much inner turmoil there right now, and they have a tough schedule this year. They have to come to Knoxville as their SEC game, and I'm excited for that game because we haven't beaten A&M since they've come in. Of course, we only played them twice, and we should have beaten them in 2016, but we fumbled the ball 7 times. And then 2020 was just an absolute disaster. So
yeah, 2020, man, that was something.
Yeah, but and throughout the rest of the SEC, I don't think there's any other real contenders out of everyone that we mentioned. I know that in terms of dark horses, obviously a lot of people are going to bring up Kentucky as a dark horse. Devin Leary is now their quarterback. William Cohen.
Look, I love me some Devin Leary. I've seen him. I've seen what he can do in the ACC. He is going to be a better quarterback than Will Levis. The problem is Kentucky is not good. They've never been good. They are once again a Potemkin village. They should be better than they are, but the problem is they're so used to being a doormat. Everybody is so used to Kentucky being, the worst team in the SEC. They're on Vanderbilt level of bad. They're the doormat. Now that they have any sort of sustained success, even if that success is just bowl eligibility, minimum baseline bowl eligibility, they're anointed. And it's stupid. Devin Leary is the best quarterback Kentucky has had probably since Tim Couch. But he's not a magician. All right. Devin Leary wasn't a magician, before, and he's not going to be now.
I will say this. I hate the fact that we have to go to Lexington the week after we go to Tuscaloosa. I don't like where that game falls in the schedule.
I think it'll be fine. I think that is the most jacked up and juiced that this Tennessee team's going to be. If you can pull a second win against Alabama, you're riding that wave and you're feeling yourself. You're feeling confident. You're not going to go and overlook Kentucky. You're not going to go in and overlook Kentucky.
That scare me. That, and then going to Missouri before Georgia at home.
That one scares me.
Because I think, Missouri, I know they've been 6-6 for 3 straight years. We put up 60 plus in them 2 straight years in a row. But I do think when you look at their roster, they've done some good stuff offensively. Now, I don't think they have the athletes to really stop us defensively. But if we get in a situation where, let's say we're 8-1 heading into Missouri, we have to win that game to be in a position to win the SEC East against Georgia, or at least have a chance to. I could see us falling short. And I think, for the Vols, that's one thing I'm going to need to see this year is taking care of the business on the road, because we weren't able to do that last year in the other Columbia. So if we're in a situation like that again in November and we're going to the other Columbia, I want to see us take care of business in that spot. And that's why at Kentucky and at Missouri, to me, are two of the more critical games. Because if you take care of business against South Carolina and Texas A&M earlier in the year, then Kentucky and Missouri become massive, massive games before Georgia. And games you're going to have to navigate through to get to that spot. So it's certainly interesting. Because I think Mizzou could be improved. And Missouri needs to be improved, or otherwise Eli Drinkwitz is going to get fired. Because that team has not improved at all since he's taken over. And I think he needs to show 8+ wins this year, I think, to maintain his job. Because outside of Jimbo, and Jimbo obviously has a ton of pressure on him in terms of hot seat, I think Drinkwitz is next up. So now, let me ask you an interesting question here. Who do we think the worst team is? Obviously, I know the obvious answer is Vandy in terms of worst SEC team. But I will say this. I think Mississippi State might give them a run for their money. I think with what happened, at the end of the last offseason with the unfortunate passing of Mike Leach, and now the whole offense has to be revamped. It's not going to be what Leach ran. I know Will Rogers is still there. He's a good QB. But I think they're in a really bad spot. And they're in a tough division. I think every team in the SEC West is going to be better than them, including Auburn. I could see this turning into a disaster season for Miss State.
I could see that. I still think it's going to be Vanderbilt, but you have a very valid point with Mississippi State. I think it's going to be tough for them, but at the same time, I think if there's ever a time to do it, and for a team to do it, it would be them, because you're not going to want to give up. All those guys are going to rally around that as well. And while I think it'll be difficult, I still think that they're going to be able to. They'll pull together a few wins. Vanderbilt's still going to be the doormat.
Or, would even be, what I would love to see is Florida. Florida being the absolute worst team. And they might have the worst offense in the conference. I think there's a good chance, with Graham Mertz piloting the ship. I mean, talk about, you go from an athletic freak in Anthony Richardson, and you barely can make a bowl game with Anthony Richardson as your QB. Now you're going to go to Graham Mertz as your quarterback. Gus, okay.
Good luck.
Oh, Bill Napier, do you think he has room for improvement? Because he had Anthony Richardson, and he, of course, had some key wins. Against the biggest was against Utah at home. I don't know. I think Bill Napier is as hot seat as Jimbo Fisher.
Ooh, I don't know if it's that hot seat, but I think he's going to be on that type of hot seat after this season. But I don't think he's there now, because I think, obviously they're clearly in a rebuild, and his recruiting class so far for next season is actually doing pretty well. They have a top 10 class, but they just had some serious embarrassments this offseason. The whole Jalen Rashada thing was an absolute disaster. Of course, they had one of their QBs that was probably going to be the guy this year that got arrested last year for just some serious off-the-field issues. And the guy they had to try out for the bowl game was just awful. I mean, they couldn't do anything against Oregon State. So, I think most Florida fans, at least I've seen, know they're probably in for a serious rebuilding year. And if they make a bowl game, I think that's a success. for Florida. I really do. They get to 6-6. I think that's successful. But to me, I feel like we're talking about Florida right now the same way we were talking about Tennessee 5 years ago, and you have to wonder if Florida is going to be in that spot where Tennessee was for a while, and it just feels weird.
And they're gonna run because I thought I think it was Will Muschamp, right? He went from Mississippi State to Florida.
That was Dan Mullen.
Oh, what?
That was Dan Mullen that went from Miss State to Florida.
Oh, Dan Mullen. Because I remember when Dan Mullen went to Florida, and we thought, oh, we should have had him instead of Florida, but he never achieved the success the Gator fans thought. And now they are with Bill Napier, that wasn't a really high profile coach, and when I think he was in another conference, but
Florida's Louisiana.
Yeah, so like Bill Napier, I think tenure in Florida kind of is gonna go like Derek Dooley at Tennessee. I think he's gonna go more like Derek Dooley, the Bill Napier, like because Dooley had some good wins, but he was an average coach.
I mean, did he though? He didn't have anyone that was like Utah. I mean, if anything, so he reminds me more of Butch Jones. Butch Jones had a handful of good wins, like a Utah, because Derek Dooley had his best win in 3 years was NC State. So I mean, Dooley won no games. So I don't know. It's going to be fascinating. To me, in terms, though, I guess real quick, in terms of championship, what do you think the SEC championship is going to be, and who do you think is going to win it?
Alabama, sorry. Like, I wanted to say Tennessee, but my prediction is going to be Georgia, Alabama, and I think the Bulldogs win.
I mean, it's kind of a cliche answer, but I tend to agree.
I will go Georgia, LSU. Georgia wins. So I'll be a little bit of an outlier there. But I don't believe in Bama. So we'll see what happens. I guess we didn't mention Auburn. I think Auburn will be a lot better, but I don't really want Hugh Freeze to do very well. But but I guess let's move on to the NFL. We were going to do an NFL preview, but I think we can save that for later. I think we can consolidate AFC and NFC, honestly, when we get to November, or not November, August. Anyway, but there is one NFL topic I do want to talk about, and it feels like I've been here before with this particular type of topic. A veteran receiver gets signed by my Tennessee Titans. This time it's DeAndre Hopkins. And obviously on my timeline, on my social media, a lot of people are extremely excited. They think, oh my God, here we go. The Titans have gotten what they need to finally get over the hump. We have solved all of our wide receiver issues. That's the problem. He can't throw the ball to himself. Because I'll admit, when I saw the news on Sunday, I had an instant, like a momentary moment of excitement. But then I remember 2 years ago, however long ago it was, Julio Jones had the same exact announcement, and that didn't pan out as well as I thought it would. I mean, we still were the 1 seed that year. We still won the AFC South, but ultimately, we were let down.
You were the 1 seed and then lost to the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, so I mean, it was still a really good season, and I would kill for that now again, but I don't think we're going to quite do that this year. I'll just put it mildly. Now, granted, my objective thoughts are clearly we needed to do something at wide receiver, and it's something. I think DeAndre Hopkins clearly is your WR1 on the team. We clearly needed a linchpin there. So it's an upgrade, but I don't think it's a game-changing upgrade. The game-changing upgrade would have been not trading away A.J. Brown, clearly. But even if A.J. Brown was still here, I mean, as you said, Our quarterback situation right now is not the greatest. Granted, I wouldn't blame
Not the
Tannehill
greatest. It's terrible.
I mean, I'm okay. So Tannehill has had his moments of brilliance since 2019, but clearly postseason, he's terrible in the postseason. He wasn't great last year. Granted, he had no one to throw to last year. When you had games where Westbrook Akeen was the WR1. I mean, it's just
wow. It's crazy. If only they had a guy like AJ Brown, maybe he'd have been good.
Yeah, that's so I can't blame Tannehill for all of it, but I mean, at the same time, I was reminded of this. I mean, did Patrick Mahomes lose a beat when he lost Tyreek Hill? I mean, his receiving core wasn't phenomenal either, but Patrick Mahomes is just, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. So he was able to make it work and win a Super Bowl. So Tannehill clearly he's not a quarterback good enough to elevate the roster around him when he doesn't have elite talent. But he's good enough to do well when there is elite talent around him. The only problem is there isn't right now. I guess now the question is, okay, so the Titans offense could do nothing. They had a tendency last year of they would go out first drive, score a touchdown, and then do nothing for the rest of the game. That was, I felt like, the entire season for Tennessee. They couldn't do nothing after the first 15 scripted plays. And, I would, if the offense can stay healthy, I can see us being slightly improved, but I don't see us being improved nearly enough to make any significant difference in the outcome of the season. At best, the best case scenario is like a 9-8, 10-7 at best, if everything goes right.
I agree that the ceiling is very, very low.
Yeah, and which in this AFC South, they still could win it because obviously Jacksonville's the favorite with the way they ended the season last year. But we have to see if they can sustain it. And I think we have to see what they do defensively. They're not like the Chiefs yet.
But I think this DeAndre Hopkins going to the Titans is more a testament on how the Patriots can't, convince a good offensive player to join them because, it makes more sense to the Patriots than to the Titans because Titans is on a rebuilding mode. They don't have a really QB number one, but the Patriots, even though they have a QB number one, you can talk about Mac Jones, but he's the starter, and Patriots have probably more bigger shot to make the postseason. But DeAndre Hopkins prefers to play at a team that have more offensive tools and probably more chances to be a better individual player than the Patriots that literally last year had a really mass offense.
Okay, so I'll contest some of that. So I think the Patriots are right now a better team than the Titans, but I do think the Titans have a better shot the postseason because the Patriots play in a way tougher division. They have to deal with the Bills, who are right now a consistent championship contender. The Dolphins, who if they can stay healthy, they have that fringe capability, and then the Jets just got Aaron Rodgers. So we'll see how much that truly elevates them. But any of those three teams would win the AFC South, no questions. And for the Titans, yes, they're a much worse team, but they're also playing in a much worse division, where roster-wise, they're either the second or third best team in the division. And if they're healthy, they could be the second best. And maybe even still could win it if Jacksonville doesn't pan out. And I think for DeAndre Hopkins, if you're trying to make the postseason, I think honestly Tennessee has the better chance to do that, considering the division. Now, in terms of obviously that doesn't help you winning any championships, but you can still make the wild card round potentially.
Now, Nick, how long of a contract did he sign?
I believe it's 3 years, and I think it's $12 million a year. So I don't think we overpaid. It was a fair contract. So I don't know. I'm not like he's going to be an all-pro wide receiver, but I do think it was a good signing for Tennessee.
We know people. We know people like that, so that's hilarious. I also think, that's probably a longer contract than the Patriots were willing to give, to be honest. And he, at this point in his career, he wants job security, and that's how you get it. You maybe not signing with the best team, but you're going to take the longest contract, and the one, that the Titans gave is probably not one that the Patriots would give.
Yeah, but it's crazy to think where he was a few years ago, and he's only getting $12 million per year. But guys like Christian Kirk are getting like 18 per year. It's just like how much his value has dropped the past few years. So it's crazy to see that. But I'll be curious to see if he can bounce back at all in Tennessee. And I think, can he be a deep threat guy? Can we consistently have a guy to get him down the field? Because, obviously Malik Will is definitely not the guy. If Tannehill can stay healthy, I mean, he was able to get the ball downfield to A.J. Brown semi-regularly, when those two had a good connection. And, of course, we'll have to see about Will Levis, if he even plays this year, which I hope he doesn't. But I do fear that if things go sideways,
I hope he does.
We'll see that experiment.
I hope he plays twice this season, at least.
Yeah, honestly, it'd be kind of interesting to watch the Levis versus Richardson duel. But then again, will Richardson even start for the Colts? I mean, I think he'll start by the end of the year. But
yeah, I think he's going to start. Gardner Minshew's not starting. That's the only competition he's going to have.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it'd be for the best. Let him take the hits now. Let him take and plus you have Jonathan Taylor. Like you can, it's not like he has to go in there and throw the ball 50 times a game.
I think that this is the opportunity to play him because, if the Colts are not going to re-sign Jonathan Taylor, this is the opportunity to feed him the ball as many times as possible and be reckless with it because he's not going to be re-signed. This is his contract year. You feed him the ball that many times, maybe you go and draft a new running back.
I mean, it's kind of interesting. This could be the last year where we see the Colts and Titans be anchored by running backs. The Colts with Taylor and then the Titans with Henry. Like this could be it for that, which is kind of crazy to think about because it feels like it's been that debate for years at this point, the whole Taylor Henry thing, and now that era could be coming to an end after this season. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see both teams. And I think, considering where the league is going, both teams are going to have to find a way to be more pass oriented, for sure. And
I mean, that's the league.
Yeah. So, and clearly, neither team's receiver room right now is getting it done, or quarterback room. But hopefully, we'll see what happens. I think the Texans honestly might have a better shot moving forward of getting themselves into a better spot. I like some of the moves they've done this offseason.
And we'll see.
So,
I think that the moves the Jags have made have been tremendous. I think they are definitely the team to beat. But it is what it is. I honestly, I'm expecting the Colts to hover at 500.
Yeah, and that would be a big improvement for the Colts from last season. So I think that would be huge. And honestly, the only thing that gives me any hope is Mike Vrabel, because I still think he's a very good coach, and I don't completely blame what happened at the end of last year on him. I think a lot of that was personnel moves for the GM and injuries. And because like the year before when we were the 1 seed, we had to play like 91 players that season. And we probably shouldn't have been in the position we were at the end of that year, considering the injury situation. But last year, it actually caught up with us. So I'll just be curious to see how that all unravels.
Yeah, I will be curious as well. But again, I'm not expecting much from either of our teams, Nick.
Yeah, I certainly agree. Yeah. I'm more excited for Saturdays than Sundays. What between the Tennessee and Titans, like what percentage of touchdowns will be scored by the team in orange versus the team in blue? It feels
3 out of every 4.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, the I think Jacksonville probably is the kind of everybody expects to win the division. I think the Jaguars probably, I don't think they're gonna have a great season, but I think they're gonna win the division again. But
Yeah.
let's real quick
Honestly, we
finish.
were going to talk about AFC East, but frankly, we just talked about the AFC South. So let's just say we talked about the AFC South tonight because I don't think there's much more to add beyond what we just said.
Honestly,
Yeah, I'll just add the schedule, but yeah, but I do kind of want to move on, I guess, to some soccer because Lionel Messi is making his debut in the States this weekend with Inter Miami. But the big news today was Cristiano Ronaldo from Saudi Arabia with his fat contract, talking about how the Saudi league is way better than MLS. And especially as you two with bigger soccer fans than me, what is your take on Cristiano Ronaldo blasting MLS?
First of all, I just want to say it's hilarious. I see many memes. Botafogo fans are kind of furious with Al Nasser, Cristiano Ronaldo's team, because they stole Botafogo's coach, Luis Castro, away from them. Al Nasser hired Luis Castro as their new head coach. And Botafogo, I'm gonna get to the Brazilian topic, is doing phenomenal Brazilian championship. So yeah, I think that's funny at all. Like people are saying, audio master Cristiano Ronaldo say like, "Hey, why your team stole our coach?" kind of stuff. But I think what is funnier about this discussion is I think Cristiano Ronaldo kind of is standing up for his boss. Not only Al Nasser but the Saudi Arabian league, because now Saudi Arabian league is competing with the MLS to kind of be this new emerging league, because what Saudi Arabian league is trying to do is getting veteran players to boost their marketing and kind of improve their soccer in their country. And that's what MLS, not much now, but in the past did, with Beckham, Lampard, Pirlo, Thierry Henry, you name it.
Kaká.
Yeah, Kaká, Pato. So I know now MLS changed their kind of view for more like getting younger talent, especially here from South America. But I think the competition right now became what emerging league can be on the headlines because of their superstar. Is Messi with Inter Miami or Cristiano Ronaldo with Al Nasser? Am I right, Jason? This is a like kind of like a battle for attention of like sub soccer league.
I think currently it's the MLS. The MLS is more well established. The problem is what MLS is doing is not sustainable, whereas what the Saudi League is doing probably is, because the Saudi League keeps getting injections, cash injections from the Public Investment Fund, PIF, in Saudi Arabia. It is a state-backed league, and the Saudi Arabian government has a ton of money, more
But
money than they know what to do with. Their investments are probably sustainable, whereas in MLS, you keep sustaining them. It's like a pyramid scheme. You have all of these teams and you just keep adding and adding and adding, and that's not sustainable. You have like 30 teams in the league right now. That's too many. It's the talent is diluted. And the way that MLS is set up is not sustainable either, because the way that the players sign with the league, and then the league allocates players, but the players only will sign it with, Messi will only sign if he can go to Miami. Well, okay, that's fine, but the way that the league is set up is backwards. And so in the Saudi league, I think is in a better position long term.
I don't know about that, because I don't know if you remember 10 years ago, what Saudi Arabia is doing is what China did. China was really invested in, getting their league superstar. I think Oscar left.
100%.
Oscar
Oscar
left.
left Chelsea, yeah.
Yeah, Oscar left Chelsea for China, and I know he's still there. But not only him, Hulk went to China. High-profile coaches like Lippi, Capello, even here in Brazil, like Felipão, Luxemburgo, you know, they all went to China, but now China, keep a handful of it. I only can think about Oscar, and probably there's one or two more, but the majority already left. So I don't
See,
know.
I agree with you, but here's the disagreement. Here's where I think it's different. Saudi Arabia has the unlimited money to keep it going. China didn't. China made the big splash at the beginning, tried to make it work, and they just couldn't sustain it. Whereas Saudi Arabia is going to be able to keep making those investments over and over.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why China has to be consistently like they're investing all over the world and trying to get into Africa, especially because they don't have unlimited resources at home versus Saudi Arabia.
That's the difference for me, Gus. It's the same exact principle, but they have the money to back it, whereas China didn't.
Yeah, I mean that's why MLS is trying to acquire talent. Maybe they want to, see themselves as trying to be this new hot market to sell to Europe. Be kind of, hey, like, cause like what I mean, what kind of Portugal and even Russia leagues are, where players go when they got their, it's not their big contract, but their new first contract, and then they go to the big team, like for example, Hulk, when he went, or even Falcao Garcia. I forgot it, but there's so many players that went to those kind of not big leagues, but to their like second tier leagues, and then went to the first league. MLS is trying to do that, getting younger talent, like in the because like Messi to Inter Miami 5 years ago, 8 years ago, will be the norm. But now kind of isn't. I don't even remember before Messi when what was the veteran European big star European player who went to MLS, because there's a
Bastian Schweinsteiger, baby.
yeah, but that was what 2017.
It's been a while, but I mean, even Inter Miami has a couple of players. They've
Yeah,
got
Gonzalo Higuain was there before, I think, like in 20. I know Gonzalo Higuain was there. Probably Suarez. There's a rumor here in Brazil that Suarez might join Inter Miami because he's been dealing with knee injuries at Grêmio. And I don't know if Suarez is able to keep playing in a higher level in Brazilian soccer, but here in Brazil, like especially some soccer YouTubers and pundits say that Suarez, is still able to play professionally in the US because of the it's not as competitive as Brazilian soccer, but still though, I think Messi would attract fans and gonna get some, ticket sales, up, and but I don't think Inter Miami is gonna be competitive at least for like 4 or 5 years. I like Orlando is still trying to make a great playoff run. Like they got Kaká, they got Pato, they got Nani, and they're still kind of on the bottom of MLS. They haven't make any big runs.
Well, I think the most indicting thing I remember earlier this year when I believe it was Austin, they lost to that team in Haiti, the Violeta, and it just goes to show that even one of the top teams in MLS, you know, we're still really not that high up in terms of talent. And could suffer just an awful, awful loss. And we see the MLS influence on the U.S. men's team and the problems that causes. So, and Saudi Arabia literally just beat Argentina in the World Cup.
Mm, I think that was more like an outline. It was like what we call here a zebra kind of game. It was like 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 a
a
big
fluke.
a fluke, like was uh, uh something that, like as you said, like a fluke. But uh, I think just finishing my part, Cristiano Ronaldo was standing up for his league because he knows that he has to make his league more value and keep the rivalry with Messi going, because like deep down even Messi knows that Messi Ronaldo rivalry that keep both of them being the top players in the world.
Yeah. And going back to the point that you were making before about who is even the last few players to come over to MLS, Blaise Matuidi, went to Inter Miami from PSG. Xherdan Shaqiri is on the Chicago Fire. He went over from Lyon in France, but they're not getting the big time names anymore. Not the biggest names. Those are big names, don't get me wrong, but they're not Messi. They're not Ronaldo. Messi wouldn't have come here if he wasn't getting an ownership stake in David Beckham's team. I mean, honestly.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I tend to agree with you, Gus, that I think, you know, we're past that point. And I think the problem that MLS is going to have is the problem with Ezekiel Barco. He was a very highly rated talent coming out of Argentina, signed with Atlanta United, and then he just flamed out. He never got his Europe move. And now he's back in Argentina at River Plate. That is the type of risk that you run as a young player instead of going to an academy like a Dortmund or an Ajax, instead of going to one of these big-time European academies. Benfica is another one. Chelsea is another one. If you go to MLS, your career may stall because the quality is just not there. And the infrastructure for developing that talent is not there. That's the problem MLS is going to have.
And I go even deeper into your analysis. There's a lot of young Brazilian players who went to the MLS. But they're not succeeding. Thales Magno was a really high-profile player that was at Vasco, and he was at NYCFC, and he'll probably not make his European move. Luis Araújo left Sao Paulo with a very young age, and he was a promising player for Atlanta United. Now he's back at Flamengo here, and he's not doing very well. He's in the reserves. So I think what I was and to add it to your point, like unfortunately MLS has not developed in a way that young talent can see themselves making a jump from MLS to Europe. I thought that because and it just showed that the Miguel Almiron example was probably one like a fluke, because that was the only
that's
big
a testament to him rather than the development.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's going to be a problem. And there's a reason that all of the top talents in the United States that are top talents as senior players were the ones that left. They were the ones that left early. Christian Pulisic left early. You don't see the Matt Turner very often. Matt Turner being a guy who went to Arsenal after cutting his teeth at the New England Revolution. That's not, that's the outlier. That's not the standard.
Yeah, it's frustrating too because obviously we during our last live show we reacted live to the end of U.S. and Panama, and of course that was just a really frustrating loss for them to go down in the semifinals of the Gold Cup. And obviously none of the A teamers, the ones that play in Europe, were playing in that game outside of Matt Turner. And as I said, to me, once again, that game was just another indictment of MLS and how that talent is just not where it needs to be. And yes, the Apple TV deal I think has been a good thing. MLS is visible every time you turn on a Roku, every time you turn on your streaming devices. MLS is there; it's being promoted. But in terms of, will it increase the talent level? I think that remains to be seen.
Yeah, there's a YouTuber here that I really follow, Hika Pehona. He's making a statement like United States, everybody wants the United States to be good at soccer because everybody knows how US is good at making sports a good entertainment product. We talked about, but unfortunately, the culture is just not there. And if you really think about it, bring it to this game, US Panama. US should beat Panama with the B team because Panama is a small island with probably the population that is the size of probably the state of Kentucky, and US is 300 million people as a population, and how can US doesn't find players to defeat those teams and make excuse I know compare US to Brazil is different. Brazil is a superpower and has the culture, but US should beat those small CONCACAF countries because they're far from professionalized leagues. I understand losing to Mexico and even Canada now, but I just, for me, losing to Trinidad Tobago, Panama, Haiti, Republic,
Honduras. They're
Honduras.
not an island nation, but Honduras. My God, they in their stupid plain white shirts with the big ass H on their chest. Oh, the plain. Oh my God, I hate the Honduras
I mean,
national
we
team.
should
It's
run
so
the
annoying.
roughshod over CONCACAF, and we don't. And until we consistently do outside of Mexico, I mean, we shouldn't even think about being competitive on the world stage because we can't control our own backyard. I mean, it's just insanity. But you have a good point, Gus. It really, as I said, the culture isn't right for it, and we don't make it easy in this country to play soccer from a young age. It's expensive to play soccer in this country for no reason. It should be uh, the cheapest sport to play.
Yeah, and just wrapping up this topic, and I'm gonna get to Jason's Jason. I just saw this news that CONCACAF wants to, CONCACAF and CONMEBOL, the South American soccer conference, are studying a tournament between their clubs. Uh, in 2025 with 16 teams, kind of like a Final Four. And I don't know, like Conquer. I think this move kind of makes sense. It's kind of like what the SEC and Big Ten doing. I think CONCACAF knows that they have to merge forces with CONMEBOL to make like a really stronger American soccer, because Europe did that. Europe is closing themselves. Especially in a nations level. With the Europe, UEFA Nations League kind of closed the borders. Like you don't see U.S. and Brazil have friendly matches with any European teams because they play among themselves. So CONMEBOL and CONCACAF have to join forces to make their kind of like soccer teams and soccer nations better, or they're gonna keep losing World Cups. Brazil in 2000, now I know Argentina won in 2022, but it was like 20 years with Europe dominance, European teams dominating World Cup, but also in the FIFA Club World Cup has been 11 years with European teams winning.
Yeah, I think that it's great. I think the national tournament as well. Having the friendly relationships between CONMEBOL and CONCACAF um, to have the United States and Mexico and whoever as a guest participant, and um, in the South American I forget what it's called, the
Copa
you could jump.
America, the
That's
Copa
the
America.
one, yeah, Copa America. And having some sort of tournament internationally is going to be great. And then the club thing is going to be great as well, especially I want to see some River Plate versus uh
Miami.
Chicago Fire, whatever. I think that'd be fun. I think it's a good marketing experience as well because you can further market your clubs, but I also think it provides an opportunity for growth of the league in on the club side. But I think it's going to be more beneficial on the national stage, um, especially for a nation like the United States, where you don't go out and play all those friendlies. You just play Mexico and all these different tournaments, and Mexico is your measuring stick. You got to have Brazil, Argentina, even Colombia. If you guys remember Colombia um, when they had the guy that ended up at Chelsea, the winger, I forget his name.
Rodriguez, James Rodriguez,
Oh, him too.
Falcao
Yeah,
Garcia, Falcao Garcia.
they had Radamel Falcao. They had James Rodriguez. There was another guy too, and I'm trying to think what his name was. He played at Chelsea. He played at Juventus for a while. He was a
Zuniga.
winger. No, he was a right winger. Oh crap! Of course, I can't remember his name. Um, but he was on that team as well. Colombia was really good for a while. You got all these different teams, all
Oh,
these different national sides.
Cuadrado.
Yeah, Juan Cuadrado, that's him. Um, you had all these different guys, and even even a Peru. Chile. They have strong sides as well. I think this is good for the nations like the United States, Chile, Ecuador, Colombia, with all of these talents. Moises Caicedo being the current Ecuadorian talent. This is an opportunity for them to boost their stock and for them to be able to measure themselves against better sides, you know, rather than just getting beaten by Brazil and Argentina all the time.
No, yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting. I want to move to Brazilian soccer with you, Jason, on it because you brought up a good point. Because Santos fans are kind of happy right now because they sold their striker Angelo to Chelsea. According to Globosport.com, was 15 million euros, 80 million reais, and the striker's already in London to get a little bit like to
Is he in
kind of.
London? I heard he was going straight to the U.S., but regardless, he's meeting up with the team.
Yeah, he's there to kind of get used to the environment, get used to the environment. And Santos needed that money really bad because they need to go to the market. Their team is atrocious, atrocious. They just lost to Sao Paulo 4-1. Their team is atrocious, and but I think and as I was telling you, Jason, Angelo, I think can be a good striker. He is a promising player. It's just he wasn't doing his best as Santos, and I think the fans are gonna miss him. But I wish good luck in Chelsea.
It's not exactly what I want to hear as a supporter of Chelsea, but at the same time, how much of that is to do with the level of teammates that he had? He's not a magician. We're talking about that earlier. Devin Leary's not a magician. Well, neither is Angelo Gabriel, and I think that whatever happens with him, I think 15 million euros is a solid buy for Chelsea. I think it's a good opportunity for him to get to Europe. He's probably going to go to Strasbourg, to Racing Club Strasbourg Alsace in France. They're baby Chelsea now. I know their supporters don't want to hear that, but he's going to end up there. He'll probably get a shot to play with Chelsea. And worst case scenario, you flip him to a club like Fulham or Crystal Palace. If he doesn't work out, and best case scenario is he blows up into an incredible player, and he's playing alongside guys like Andre Santos and Cesare Casadei in 2030.
That's the player that I really think is gonna blossom in Chelsea. Andre, he's a really good midfielder.
I'm
very
so excited for him.
Yeah, he's dynamic. He is very differential. Like he had to go back to Vasco because of is this just a stupid rule that he didn't met any like a point measure or something like that. He couldn't play at Chelsea. I think that's a stupid rule, but I'm excited to see him.
It's a Brexit thing.
Uh,
After Brexit, the United Kingdom didn't have the European Union's visa rules, and so he missed out by 1 point on his qualification, and he had to go back to Brazil on loan. He was somebody that Chelsea could have used in the first team last season, and he's going to come in, and people are sleeping on him. I think Andre Santos is going to be somebody who makes a very large impact in the Chelsea first team, this year, especially with a guy like Enzo Fernandez. And then you probably are going to get a Moises Caicedo as well. That could be your starting midfield. Those three guys and Christopher and Nkunku either playing up top or wherever. And I know that's not really Brazilian sports, but Andre Santos, he has shown his quality. He has played in the Brazilian senior side as well. He's done well.
He was the top.
Captain at the. He was the captain at the World Cup, right? The Under-20 World Cup.
He was the star at the Under-20 World Cup, and he was also the biggest star Vasco had probably in a decade. I know when he went out on loan, he couldn't play much games, and he wasn't as probably useful as Vasco fans probably hoped for. But Vasco's been in turmoil, as Nick knows, and I talk about how they're being really on turmoil. But I think he's gonna do well at chess. But Jason Wire, thanks so much for joining our podcast. Every time you come, our episode get longer because it's such a good time talking to you.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me. Sorry to keep you up till 1 a.m. your time, Gus. I apologize for that. Happy tomorrow, to everybody
Yes,
in
happy tomorrow to
Brazil and
all of us.
everybody
I
on the
mean,
East Coast.
hey, though,
I
it's always
appreciate
a
you
great
guys having me
time.
on.
And, it's good reminiscing about some dark times in Tennessee football history and going to talk about, all those other topics. And, it's always such a good time. And as Gus says, and I'll reiterate, you're welcome to come on anytime.
I appreciate that, guys. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, but for Gustavo Tomazeli,
Oh,
yeah, Paul, you didn't let me get a chance to finish up the show, but this has been episode 86 of the only podcast to do Brazilian and American sports. You have a good one.